Louis Riel and the Métis by Paul. Who is Louis Riel? Louis Riel was born in 1844, October 22. He lived in Saint Boniface in the Red River settlement with his father. His dad was a businessman and a political leader in the Métis community. Louis Riel's father organized a large Métis resistance to the Hudson Bay Company fur trading monopoly in 1849. Riel's political legacy influenced his son, Louis Riel, who left the Red River Resistance at a young age to study in Quebec. How did Louis Riel help promote the Métis cause? In March 1869, the HBC, or the Hudson Bay Company, agreed to sell Rupert's Land in the Northwestern Territory to the Dominion of Canada. Survey crews were sent to the Red River Resistance to assess and restake the lands. The Métis organized the Métis National Committee in order to protect the social, cultural, and political status of the Métis in the Red River and the Northwest more generally. Louis Riel wanted to stop the surveyors from taking more land from the Métis. Since Louis Riel was an articulate young man with an Eastern education, he was elected as president for the Red River Resistance and halted the Canadian land surveyors. After some time passed, the Red River Committee was instructed to establish a roadblock to prevent the Canadian land surveyors. Louis Riel helped the Métis keep their land at the Red River Resistance. The execution of Thomas Scott. Thomas Scott was arrested and jailed twice by the provincial government of Assiniboia, led by Louis Riel. Scott was a member of the Canadian Party, which opposed the Métis Nation. Scott and others were captured by Louis Riel and held prisoner in Fort Garry. Thomas Scott was later convicted for treason and executed by the provincial government led by Louis Riel on March 4, 1870. Military forces were later sent by John A. Macdonald to confront the Métis at the Red River. Sir John A. Macdonald tried to persuade Louis Riel to remain in voluntary exile in the United States. John A. Macdonald also wanted to provide Louis Riel money if he stayed in the U.S. and lived with his family. In Ontario, Louis Riel was denounced as Thomas Scott's murderer. Someone was even offering a reward of $5,000 for his arrest. Once Louis Riel heard about this information, he decided to take John A. Macdonald's offer and move to the United States. In Quebec, Louis Riel was regarded as a hero. He defended the Roman Catholic faith and the French culture. Louis Riel's exile. Louis Riel lived in the U.S. until he had a mental breakdown. His friend's secretary brought him to a hospital against his own wishes in Montreal. Louis Riel was later transferred to a mental asylum in Quebec. In January 1878, Riel went to New York and got married to a Métis woman. Riel later became an American citizen and joined the Republican Party. Return to Canada. Louis Riel enjoyed his time until he started to get involved with Métis politics again. In 1884, the Métis of Saskatchewan asked Riel to return to Canada and help deal with the Canadian government. Louis Riel agreed to help as long as his family could join him and that he would be able to return to America once things settled down in Saskatchewan. The Métis were upset because surveyors did not own title to the land and were afraid of losing it to the British settlers. Riel tried to help by writing a petition to the Canadian government in Ottawa. The petition Riel wrote was about how farmers who were dissatisfied with wheat prices and high costs and tariffs on farming machinery, and they were also upset that their settlements were not reached by the new Canadian Pacific Railways. The government promised a commission to investigate the petition, but they had promised this before, and the Métis did not believe them. In 1885, the Métis tried again by writing a Bill of Rights, which asserted rights to their farmlands. This time, the Canadian government didn't promise anything and ignored the Bill of Rights. The Battle of Batoche, 1885. After word got out that the federal government was sending 500 soldiers to Batoche in answer to the Métis petitions, the Métis went and seized the parish church at Batoche. They then formed a provisional government of which Louis Riel was president and demanded the surrender of the HBC post at Fort Carleton. The fight lasted for 2 months. The Métis won the first of the two engagements, but the Canadians ultimately overwhelmed the Métis soldiers. Louis Riel surrendered himself to the Canadian military. Arrest and trial. On July 6, 1885, Louis Riel was accused of treason and found guilty by a judge composed of white British Canadians. His trial began in Regina. Against Louis Riel's wishes, his counsel defended Riel on the grounds of insanity, pointing to the time he spent in the asylum in the late 1870s. However, Riel understood that by casting him as insane, his lawyer would discredit the Métis' legitimate grievances against the Canadian government. Riel wanted to pursue a claim of self-defense instead, arguing that the Métis' actions both in 1870 and 1885 were justifiable. Louis Riel ended his trial with a speech that dismantled his lawyer's insanity defense strategy. This speech proved Riel's sanity, but it also led to Louis Riel's execution. Riel was hanged on a public gallows on November 16, 1885. Louis Riel Day. Louis Riel is now honored as a Canadian hero. The Métis celebrate him because he was the father of Manitoba. He also helped speak up for the Métis and their rights. There are many statues around Canada honoring Louis Riel, but the main one is in Winnipeg. The date of 2007, November 16, is now declared as Louis Riel Day in Manitoba and around Canada. Louis Riel's effect on Canada. Louis Riel's execution has had a long-lasting effect on Canadian history. In central Canada, the political fallout from Riel's hanging enlivened the French-Canadian nationalism, an organization that House of Traditions. The organization propelled the Premier of Quebec in 1886 to talk about the feelings the community had about Louis Riel's death. Louis Riel's death also caused a fundamental shift in Quebec voting trends, moving the province's traditional support of the Conservative Party to the Liberal Party. Louis Riel did end up killing someone, but did he deserve to be guilty for treason? The end.